Alright, so this post is called The Way Out is In, and I published it July 6th, Saturday of 2013, and all it is just this, and it was meant to kind of be a wordless post, because, I mean, of course it was like a, I don't know, just some sort of something, because I had nothing to say at the moment, but I also knew this stuff was like coming into alignment, coming into play, and unfolding. And I don't know. So like, I'm glad that I have, this sort of space, I guess, to say something. And it's funny because this whole concept is kind of what I've been seeing and thinking about and getting to in my own mind, and even in the videos and posts and whatnot. And like, my birthday was the other day, and I just went to the bookstore to see what books might be there, and there wasn't really anything too exciting, but I did find a book I've been waiting for a while to get in hardcover, because you can get it in paperback, but I'd rather have hardcover because they are more sturdy. But it's The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, and it's pretty much like a classic, you could say. It's not that old, but it's like mythology 101 almost. Well, I guess it's from 1940. Is it really from 1949? Well, if it's from 1949, then maybe it is a classic. That's pretty old. But the thing is that I've known of the book. It's referenced. I know what it's about. A lot of books reference it. And I just didn't want to get one until I could find a hardcover. And they're not, it's not like, the most, it's not a book that has like all sorts of out there information. It's all generally, if you know anything about mythology, even Disney movies are highly based on a lot of archetypes and myths and those recurrent motifs. So, I was just like, I haven't even read the book, begun reading it really. I've looked through it, and I see that, what it's generally about. It's walking you through how myths are, even dreams and myths, they're all, the first section is called the mono myth, and it's like all the same. Yeah, there's different cycles, different stories, different aspects, but in a lot of ways, it's all the circle, basically. It's all a cycle of coming back to, going through this sort of like dark side of the underworld, which is really the subconscious, and then coming back around with that knowledge. And obviously the hero is what it refers to, the hero with 1,000 faces. But the hero in all the mythologies is kind of pretty much what you're supposed to understand through your own initiation as being yourself. And again, with Self 101, it's symbolic of that whole thing. And I also found this other book, Philosophy in a New Key, by Suzanne Langer, and it's about symbolism and how basically philosophical systems and approaches and stuff of certain ages are entirely built based on not so much what they yield or their conclusions, but the approaches themselves, the way in which the whole questions are formulated. And it's mainly about symbolism, and it's just funny, like, because I was talking about in the last post, in the world stage, I mentioned 777, and in the posts before that, I mentioned 555 a lot, and obviously 555, 666, and 777 are numbers Aleister Crowley himself references extensively as being thelemic for various reasons. 555 is had in full, which is symbolic of that whole fractal. It's fractals, but it's symbolic of that fractal expansion and connection. And then 666 is obviously like 2 megatherion and therion in Hebrew, and so it's obviously this beast number, the man and beast connection, and obviously the evolution from beast to man to transhuman, and obviously the whole transhuman movement is 666, and there's two sides to that, obviously, just like there's generally two sides to 666, a positive and a negative, a solar and a Saturnian, an inner and an outer. And so one's like that soul number, and one's that parasite, or not so much parasitic as the shadow, the Qliphoth and all that, Qliphothic forces. And yet 777 is another amplification, and it is the world of the shells, the Olam HaQliphoth. In Hebrew, it's broken shells in Hebrew English, or Hebrew applied to English. Crowley's Liber 777, which is really a combination of Liber 58, Liber 500, and the essay, like an essay on gematria. But 777 implies obviously the Kabbalistic alignments or correspondences, especially in their manifest or applied sense. And so what I'm trying to say is that the 555, 666, 777, those are primary chambers in the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, 111 through 999, that it's especially kind of focus on, as I've said in the last post, more of like the developmental aspects of man, the psyche, the spirit, like the spirit of man is 555. And again, 5 is the number of, the spirit over matter, the pentagram, so that expansion, that, and it's just funny because like the Hebrew word for eagle is 555, and that's symbolic of, again, the flight and a lot of things. It's just the intelligence, the higher aspect of the mind, the transcendental ego, or the transcendent mind. But these things, they represent like similar to all the Kabbalistic and alchemical Rosicrucian diagrams, where it shows like an onion-like layering of reality or the material world, and even the tree of life, obviously, with Malkuth being symbolic of the external physical shell or reality, and the component foundational parts being within in like densities or densifications or vibrations or frequencies or magnitudes. Now we know of as, we call it the microscopic realm, the atomic realm, and the subatomic realm, in which, like Arthur Kessler talks about, and a bunch of other authors and researchers and whatnot show, is basically physics boils down to metaphysical or energetic components. And so it's funny because like in computers, this whole thing, the gematria, there's a paradox in that while a lot of it, is numerical and determinable, at the same time it's holographic. So it's not, so basically 555, 666, 777, the things that equal those things, they interconnect, and it's not necessarily strictly within those numbers, and none of the ideas themselves are strictly in numbers. They just manifest in those ways. But the more you practice this whole thing, at least the more I've practiced, the more I see how much data can come through the like I said, the interstices, the in-between numbers. It's really the indeterminable or innumerable or infinite aspect of things that, again, 333, all these things are little symbols to try and convey things that are actually beyond those shells, through the shells. Like that's the thing, is they'll still manifest within the numbers in a formulaic way, but the things themselves and the true nature is beyond those, emergent manifestations, or at least they can be. Those are what we see and feel and sense are obviously one aspect, one dimension, or one perspective or angle of the true. It's not even just 360. 360 is a limitation and perspective, obviously, and so it's over time that you can end up developing this higher sight, and again, higher sight, blind spot, and the whole thing about the hero with 1,000 faces is this book talks all about the Minotaur, and this whole mythology about the Minotaur and the labyrinth. And obviously, Minotaur is, I have this pulled up, is the beast. And it's discussed in the Dark Doorway of the Beast. Well, Dark Doorway of the Beast, but the Dark Doorway of the Beast is 777. Minotaur with a tau is 777. The walls, like of the labyrinth or of the mind or of, reality, the illusion created by the mind, the walls, and so in a way, this whole thing, it's just funny, like, and in the myth, Daedalus is the creator of the labyrinth. Well, Daedalus is 111, and that's that, prime. It's obviously the first chamber, but it's a very blueprinty, archetypally Masonic number dealing with this whole, the labyrinth unfolding, and the string again, the bolt, the white light, the string, Ariadne's thread, so to speak, in the labyrinth. And Minos is, Minoa, like the whole Greek thing. And it's funny because Minoa using a Vav, M-I-N, Vav A is 107, which it connects, actually, they connect it with Meon, which again, the Meon in Michael Bertaux's terminology is like the Ma-ion, or the timeless state. So, but anyway, this whole thing about the Minotaur, the beast is the, the outer aspect of the inner self, even though the Minotaur is at the center of the labyrinth. The labyrinth itself is the Minotaur, really, the beast, and it's symbolic of the mind, really, like in a lot of senses. So, and again, the whole book, the Dark Doorway of the Beast, kind of shows this, the funnel effect, or Doth, as this way out, which again, the way out is in the whole Doth thing that I'm trying to convey and talk about in my blog. It shows how there's a lot to this whole thing, though. Like, I was going to say the 111, 222, 333, 444, those are more basic elemental things. They can get real dense and telling, but even the word elements is 444, and three-dimensional is 333. 222 has a lot to do with the reflection and the expansion, or everything to do with the chakma in a lot of ways. 111 is like Kether in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it's literally Malkuth. And so it shows that connection between the above and below, the within, the without. And there's a lot to 111 dealing with this science, basically, of quantum and Kabbalistic mechanics and electrical engineering, and the mind also, and the application of these things to the mind, or the application by the mind. That's the duality kind of this. And I actually have a whole post about the labyrinth I'll get to, and whenever I eventually got Dark Doorway of the Beast, I wanted to talk about how, or what it talks about really, which is, it's just, I was tapping into these things on my own before actually getting the book and finding sort of like verification that someone else found these things too. And I don't know, it's just all these things have come together. I knew this post, I needed to say certain like things, tying these things together. And I know that that's the thing. People have, there are these dark connections. There are dark manifestations of 666, but even 777 is almost worse in a lot of senses if you look at what it represents, and how it's manifesting, through the technological grid and whatnot. And I mean, actually, I've tried to talk about this whole aspect of 777, which in like a lot of books and concepts happen to align in that number. Like I've mentioned, general semantics and the geometry of words, and Alfred Korzybski's whole thing about general semantics. And then also the mass psychology of fascism, which is that book by Wilhelm Reich, but and his whole concept of like the orgon accumulator is 777. And again, this clifothic energy is symbolic in the way that, again, it has a reciprocal feedback loop effect with our minds, with our bodies, with our souls. And again, the walls of the mind, which end up creating actual physical, like, that's the thing. These mental constructs end up in actuation. They end up in actions, basically. And when you have false constructs, you can have detrimental actions. And it's just funny because, like, I'm talking about Crowley and all this darker stuff. I'm trying to, like, show, though, that that's kind of a misinterpretation. That all this stuff has been used for bad, like weaponized, misinterpreted, misunderstood, mishandled. And I don't know. It's just that this science, so to speak, it's more than just a science. It's an art, because again, it's through the it's by the very we want things to be in their hard little boxes, but it's through that openness. It's through the the spaces in between that artistic or intuitional thing flows, that energy of. And I think, again, there's like this paradox that gematria shows, that it shows how encoded things are, like our language, but it shows how unconscious it truly is. Like we're conscious in a lot of ways of what we're saying and what we're doing, but we're not conscious of how it really interconnects, like in the greater scheme of things. I don't know any clearer way to put it other than just show these various examples, but there is a sort of inherent logic to language that is numerical, that we're not aware of generally. Like, I mean, I'm aware of it. I'm getting more aware of it. I'm trying to make others aware of it. And like, I'm just saying, take this knowledge of the Hebrew applied to English is what I find to be the more common, or like simple and more pervasive system, that when you apply it to like everyday things, like again, the news articles that come out, the buzzwords that they hear and that you'll hear that they use, just apply them to these things and you'll be like, holy shit, it is a script. The script is 777, and it's largely unconscious, but some of it is conscious. And Um, you'll have to discern for yourself where that is and when it occurs and stuff. And I don't know. It's just this. That's the thing about this 777 thing. 666. Everyone's all focused on it, but it's really the whole Kabbalah of nine chambers and that alignment. And again, the all the numbers in between, like every number, literally is a formula, and you have to look at the whole database, create your own database, but use others if it helps to get data. A lot of these online databases are just intentionally full of things that don't make any sense because they're just variations. People have realized, oh, if you add this letter, it will give that number, but it again is the meaning that is important in the logic. So it's important to kind of be as precise as possible. Obviously, with the variations in like the Teth and the Tau, the Samek and the Shin, the Gimel and the Cheth, with the Hebrew English, that gives a little ambiguity, but half of the terms and phrases have none of those variations, or when they are, they suggest themselves. Or like if you had that knowledge of those veils, the cryptogrammic or cryptological veils, then you'll see that, oh, well, like it's 5 away from this, and it, I don't know. It's just that gives a sort of like level of ambiguity, vagueness, but this whole fucking subject is kind of vague anyway. Most people don't have the attention span or the concern. They want quick, like, 1 sentence, 5-minute video at the max answers to things that are centuries old in development. Language itself, like I have books on the origins of language and theories and blah, blah, blah. And none of them, they're all lacking in a lot of ways. You really have to look at all of every culture's growth and see the trajectory, see the ups and downs, see the disagreements, see obviously where people have been wrong, more so like look at, because a lot of the times you'll find like people who have been ridiculed or claimed as being wrong, or, usually sometimes that's not the case at all. They were just a threat to certain monetary establishment type things, systems like Nikola Tesla. There's just a lot of people that if their work doesn't go towards the economic, monetary aspect of things, and if it actually interferes with that, then yeah, it's going to be ridiculed and demonized, and there's a lot more money and power that can be used to, throw something like that in the dirt than, and they'll of course use whatever good that they could be extracted from it for their own good, and then, it will be. That's kind of what Crowley, case in point again, is thrown under the bus, but yet all the techniques, all the knowledge, all the good things, it's like sucked out and used for certain people's benefits, and they want to maintain that control. So yeah, the way out is in. It is all about how these chambers, if you understand them as themselves really mental constructs, like they're levels within, they're symbolic of the veils or the levels of the mind, the body, and the whole psychosomatic connection, the connection between the mind and the body, spirit and matter, mental constructs and actuational actions and consequences, reactions. And it just goes to show, like, if you can recode, not necessarily recode, but reorient yourself to the programming, towards the codes, you have much more dynamic, strength, power, ability, control of them. And so again, like negative influences, plethothic forces, whatever, can be used as a sort of fuel. And if you know how to operate within it, within those energies and confines and restrictions, because again, Saturn is a tool, the whole friction, time, oppression or repression or compression, pressure itself, pressure is necessary in a lot of ways. Like if you had no pressure, if you had no friction, if you had no resistance, you wouldn't, that's the whole point of exercise and growth. And, like the whole metaphor of muscles, tears. It's funny because tears is 666. And rates, I haven't mentioned it, but rates is 666. All those different permutations are symbolic. Tears as Tares, obviously, or just tears is symbolic in a lot of ways. But tears is like your muscles literally tear and then get stronger. And so the physical exercises, which is 666, is symbolic in that respect. And again, the ritual is 666. Well, the ritual, again, it shows how it's mental, but physical. It's that connection between the 555 mental constructs, 666, the action or the ritual, and 777, the shells, the manifest. What happened. And then 888 is, it's got its own connections of. It's even way higher. It's like more transcendental, and that's why Jesus is symbolic of being beyond the walls, beyond the shells, or really within. And then 999 is even beyond that, because it's not necessarily beyond, it's just integrated. It's more integrated. It's the toroid itself. It's where the one has blossomed into more than just the sphere, the toroid, because the sphere is like a 3-dimensional representation, whereas the toroid is the 4-dimensional representation, or even fifth. I mean, because the 5th dimension is, as I've said, it's really just the data, the unfoldment through the 3 spatial and the 4th temporal dimension. And again, this whole number thing, like our mind clings to numbers, and we have the left and right mind, or sides of hemispheres of the brain, which interrelate and interconnect, and then we have the vertical aspect kind of the mind, of the conscious, ranging to subconscious to unconscious. And I like the work of Ken Wilber. I have his books, 2 of them, Integral Spirituality and Sex, Sex Ecology and Spirituality, the Spirit of Evolution. And it was through that book, that's when I realized the evolution is 666, and holy shit, it is this mind-body psychosomatic connection, and it is these layers or levels, the 6, the 60, the 600, and it's not a bad thing. It's simply the integration of these various things that are often left apart, broken apart, the broken shells. And it's funny, like algebra means a union of broken parts, and it's this higher abstract more abstract mathematics. Whereas really, what I've done, and I don't even, because I'm not really not big on algebra. It's too unnecessarily complicated. When all the stuff I've done is simply pretty much addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, if that, mainly addition and subtraction. And you can still achieve, that's the whole thing about math, or not even just math, but anything really, is you can get to the answer, the goal, the point, the solution, God, if you want to call it that, from many different routes, many equations, many solutions, problems, formats, formulae. paths, whatever you want to call it. And none of them are any less. I mean, some are more complicated. Some may have more, some may be more convoluted, um, and some may be so direct or so pure that everything that may be useful in terms of understanding or learning is cut out. So obviously, again, that's what I'm trying to say, is sometimes these pitfalls or lies or evils or untruths are indicative of truth or light or love or whatever. And so, again, friction, problems, darkness, whatever, it's necessary in a sense. That's not to say, oh, we need, and because a lot of that's the problem, is a lot of these problems are unnecessary because we haven't learned from them. They're not going to be learned from. We should have learned a long time ago. And it's in that sense that it's that true evil, I think, is something that, again, it can be combated, but in a sense it arises out of its, we create it, for, again, these seven, for like this, it's like the 777, the walls we create for ourselves, the labyrinth we create for ourselves, for whatever fucking reason. I mean, for our own reasons, really. And in that way, it's kind of like humanity. Like, I've talked about how we are resilient and we have created all these problems, but we've gone past them. We've solved them in a lot of ways. Some of them some of our problems, in fact, a lot of our problems go back to these ancient roots that you could say are spiritual and go back to like Genesis and Adam and whatnot. But they're psychological quandaries that, again, the hero or the initiate or the whoever, the person on the path, the candidate, the Sadaka, the student, we are always going to go through, and we can be in a different time and everything's just termed differently, but it'll be a different manifestation of the similar it's not really the same thing. Like, who was it? I watch a lot of YouTube videos, but I'm not even going to mention, but basically, yeah, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, it just echoes. And that's, again, this whole archetypal thing about the numbers themselves. The numbers echo. And it is a mechanical sort of thing, but at the same time, it's, again, that innumerable thing. And what we talk about, rationality, reason, and reasonable, and numbers. Well, like the etymology of the word rationality is ratio, and it's a wholly numerical concept, basically. Like, our minds, again, it's numerically based. Consciousness, subconsciousness, unconscious. Rational and rationale, endowed with reason. See, but reason is it's also kind of a theological concept. It's an egotistical concept in a lot of ways, and it's ironic how the ego, egocentric, is theology is egocentric in a lot of ways, and so it's important to anybody involved in a spiritual journey or path or science or study should also study philosophical teachings and paths and whatnot, as well as psychological teachings, because they all interconnect. It's kind of like that triad in a way, a revolving triad, if at all. But so yeah, mathematical sense, relationship between two numbers, reason to count, think, calculate. So this whole thing is, people claim that numerology is irrational, and to find patterns in numbers is irrational and unreasonable and crazy and blah blah blah, when literally the definition of ratio, the whole the root revolving mechanism is counting and numbers, mathematics. It's just something to think about. There's a lot of paradoxes in this. It's through those paradoxes, though, that these things become practical and can be useful. So, I don't know. I didn't want to make this whole talk too long. Hopefully it triggered or inspired something in someone to think outside of certain limitations. I understand, again, like, by putting numbers and formulae, it's like it's almost a paradox, or it is a paradox that. But I don't know. I'm just saying investigate these numbers, see how personal things can kind of align to these things, and that's what I'm saying, is that you can kind of reorientate, regenerate, manifest according to a reorientation or recoding of your own mind and will, according to what these numbers represent, which are forces, universal forces. And I don't know. I've said too much, and I want to get to this post, but I'm going to wait till later. So yeah, enjoy.